$20 trillion of real-world assets that are waiting to enter the cryptocurrency space, the transition to do its process.
Hey everyone, I've got some exciting news to share with you today. We just got word about another massive XRP event that's coming our way, and trust me, you're going to want to hear about this one. So here's what's happening. Wave of Innovation, who you might know as the team behind XRP Australia, just dropped an announcement that has me pretty pumped up. They're hosting what's shaping up to be an incredible event in Sydney on February 27th, 2026. Now, I know that might seem like it's still a ways off, but honestly, Huckles, I'm already getting excited about this. Based on what we've seen from these events before, this could be absolutely huge for the XRP community, especially considering the fact that it is all centered around XRP and the XRPL. Now, when I started digging into the details of this event, the numbers absolutely blew me away. We're talking about some seriously heavy hitters who are going to be there. I mean, the lineup is looking incredible already. And here's the thing that has me really excited. Events like this are where the magic happens. You know how it goes. When you get all these major players in one room, that's usually when we start seeing some pretty significant announcements drop. So yeah, you can bet I'm going to be keeping my eyes glued to this one. I have a feeling we're going to see some game-changing stuff come out of Sydney next year. Look, I genuinely think this is going to be amazing. And if you've been following XRP events like I have, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. Think back to events like Apex. Remember how much incredible stuff came out of those? The discussions were top-notch. The announcements were mind-blowing. And honestly, that's just what happens when the XRP community gets together like this. So you better believe I'm going to be laser-focused on everything that comes out of Sydney. My calendar is already marked, and I'm ready to dive deep into whatever gets announced. And here's what's really interesting. The timing of this event actually lines up perfectly with what we've been talking about for a while now, Q1 potentially being absolutely massive for crypto. And if you've been watching my previous videos, you know I've been pretty bullish on this timing. But wait, it gets even better. This Sydney event is happening right after Ripple Swell, which, let's be honest, is basically guaranteed to drop some major announcements. Can you imagine the momentum we're going to have? First, we get whatever bombshells come out of Swell, and then boom, straight into this Australian event. I'm telling you, the stars are really aligning here, and I am completely locked in on tracking every single development. Now, speaking of developments, there's actually something else I want to talk about. All right, I really want to zoom in on the XRP Ledger for a minute, because what I'm seeing with RWAs and stablecoins is starting to get my attention in a big way. Let me walk you through what's been happening over the last 30 days. RWA values are up about 4.3%. Nothing that'll blow your socks off, but it's solid, steady growth. Stablecoins, though? Now we're talking. They're up roughly 18%. Here's the scope we're dealing with. $365 million in RWAs and $311 million in stablecoins. That's some serious capital moving through the XRP Ledger. But here's where it gets really interesting. The transfer volumes. RWA transfers jumped almost 40% to $592 million. And stablecoins? They absolutely exploded with nearly $434 million in volume, which is up a massive 84%. When you see numbers like that in just 1 month, you know something big is brewing on the XRP Ledger. This kind of upward momentum doesn't just happen by accident. Now, when we break down which specific projects are driving this growth on the XRP Ledger, we've got some pretty impressive individual performers here. ROUSD is absolutely crushing it with almost a 32% jump. Anando's right there with it, climbing nearly 34%. And USDC, also posting solid gains at 33%. Now, I should mention, USDC is only sitting at about $7 million in total value, so we're not talking about massive dollar amounts here. But here's the thing. When you see these kinds of percentage gains across the board, it's telling us that there's real momentum building, regardless of the individual dollar figures. But the bottom line is this. We're seeing some serious growth momentum building on the XRP Ledger, and I've got to say, I'm getting pretty pumped about where this is all heading. Especially when you consider that comes back to RWAs and stablecoins. And speaking of that, we've actually had some pretty big announcements drop recently that are worth talking about. The biggest one? That's gotta be what we just heard from Braille_XYZ. So here's what makes this announcement so exciting. Braille_XYZ just cracked the code on something huge. They're saying compliance handled, speed unlocked. And honestly, that's exactly what we've been waiting for. What they've done is integrate the XRP Ledger to tackle what's probably the biggest headache in payments right now, moving regulated value without all the usual friction and delays. Here's how it works. Businesses can now issue USD-backed stablecoins, settle everything in RWAs, and tap into all of the XRP Ledger's built-in compliance features and authorized trust lines. And the best part? They can do all of this through one single API. This is basically the kind of streamlined, compliant payment solution that could be a total game changer for businesses.
All right, let me read you the actual announcement from Braille because this is pretty incredible stuff.
They're saying, "We are absolutely thrilled to share that regulated stablecoins are now live on the XRP Ledger." So what does this actually mean? Well, Braille is now supporting the issuing and managing of stablecoins directly on the XRP Ledger. We're talking about fully compliant, programmable digital dollars running on what they're calling one of the most proven payment networks in crypto. And here's where it gets really interesting. Through Braille, businesses can literally issue USD-backed stablecoins in just minutes. Think about that for a second. Minutes, not days or weeks. And it gets even better. They can seamlessly move funds between traditional banks and blockchains, settle transactions using RWAs across both the XRP Ledger and Ethereum. All of this happening through one simple API. What you're getting here is regulated infrastructure with global reach. That's the holy grail right there. And because they're tapping into the XRP Ledger's built-in compliance features,
Including authorized trust lines, freeze controls, and credentialing, regulated institutions finally have everything they need to manage stablecoins responsibly and at massive scale. So when you put it all together, Braille plus the XRP Ledger plus RWAs, what you get is digital dollars that are actually accessible to builders, fintech companies, and enterprises all around the world. We're talking about the ability to issue, settle, and move value in one API call. Start building. And this is very bullish. And this is happening at a time when the XRP Ledger already has 6 stablecoins running on it. I mean, I'm genuinely pumped about this development. But here's what has me even more excited. We know there are additional stablecoins that have been announced for the XRP Ledger that just haven't launched yet. So we're basically looking at the early stages of what could become a massive stablecoin ecosystem. Looking at what's already live on the XRP Ledger, we've got a pretty solid lineup of stablecoins right now. You've got ROUSD, USDC, EUROP, BBRL, AUD, and USDB. So that's 6 different stablecoins already up and running. But here's the thing. This is just the beginning. We're still waiting on several more that have been announced, like USV, for example. Now, remember back in November 2024 when we got that big announcement from Société Générale Forge? They said they were going to launch their EURCV stablecoin on the XRP Ledger sometime this year. Originally, they were targeting the first quarter for the launch. Well, as we can see, Q1 came and went without it happening. But check this out. If we look at Ripple XDev's recent post from October 17th, it looks like we might actually see EURCV launching pretty soon. Here's why I think that. They're highlighting both EUROP and EURCV in the same post, which tells me it's still very much on their radar. They're saying, across Europe, projects like Schumann's Europe and Société Générale's EURCV stablecoin are bringing regulated value on-chain, with the XRP Ledger serving as the foundation for secure, compliant finance. So when I read between the lines here, they're clearly indicating that EURCV is still very much in the plans. This isn't dead in the water. It's just taking longer than expected. So we're still sitting tight, waiting for that one to actually go live on the XRP Ledger. You know, this whole situation actually reminds me of something I posted about before. And this goes all the way back to May of this year, where I was talking about several stablecoins that were supposed to launch on the XRP Ledger. And you know what? Looking back at that post now, we actually did see quite a few of those predictions come true. Several of them have already gone live on the ledger. For example, BBRL and EUROP both launched just like we expected. But we're still playing the waiting game on a couple others. USDB and XSGD haven't made their debut on the XRP Ledger yet. Actually, wait, let me correct myself here. USDB did launch, so my mistake on that one. So we're really just waiting on 2 more, XSGD and EURCV. Once those 2 finally hit the ledger, we'll officially have 8 different stablecoins running on the XRP Ledger. And I know a lot of you have been asking in the comments, what about a yen stablecoin? That's a great question, and honestly, I do think we'll see a Japanese yen stablecoin show up at some point. It just makes sense given how the ecosystem is expanding. This actually brings up an interesting comparison with Stellar. If you look at what Stellar's doing right now, they've got 11 stablecoins running on their network. And guess what? They already have a yen stablecoin live on there. They've also got the Australian digital dollar, which, by the way, the XRP Ledger has that one too. But here's something that caught my attention. Stellar has a real MXN stablecoin, and this one's actually from Braille as well. Okay, so this is the Mexican peso stablecoin. Currently, there's only about $8 tied to this. But here's what I'm thinking. With this recent Braille announcement we just talked about, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Mexican peso stablecoin make its way to the XRP Ledger pretty soon. And that's not all. Stellar also has a Swiss franc and Canadian dollar stablecoin running on their network. Neither of those have made the jump to the XRP Ledger yet. But given how things are trending, who knows? We might see those pop up as well. Then there's also MAR, which is a South African rand-backed stablecoin. And you know what? Given all the major announcements we've been seeing around Africa with Ripple lately, I could totally see this one launching on the XRP Ledger as well. It would make perfect sense with their African expansion strategy, but it's still questionable on what's going to happen next when it comes to stablecoins. But what I said back then was that we're witnessing a financial revolution happening right before our eyes, and it's being powered by Ripple, XRP, and stablecoins. Here's what really blew me away. In just one single month, we saw confirmation after confirmation of stablecoins getting ready to launch on the XRP Ledger. And that's not even counting EURCV from Société Générale Forge, or RLUSD that we're still waiting on. What we're actually watching here is the massive $7.5 trillion per day Forex market starting to move on-chain in a massive way, and XRP is absolutely leading the charge here. I mean, XRP is literally at the forefront of this entire movement. These stablecoin developments are happening faster than we've ever seen before. And here's something I think everyone really needs to understand. Stablecoins are way more important than most people realize. Most folks just see them at face value. Oh, it's just a digital dollar. But they're missing the bigger picture. We're talking about unlocking trillions in value here. These things enable cross-border payments, tokenization, institutional DeFi, and honestly, so much more that we probably haven't even thought of yet.
This is literally the first domino falling in what's going to be a massive chain reaction. We're talking about unlocking incredible amounts of utility and eventually seeing trillions of dollars in value flowing through networks like the XRP Ledger. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight. That's not realistic. But what I am seeing is these developments moving at a pace we've never witnessed before in crypto. And honestly, it's absolutely thrilling to watch this shift happening in real time. The entire crypto landscape is transforming right in front of us. And yes, it really is as big as it sounds.
And this perfectly sets up the next thing I want to show you. This post from High Vibe Assets that absolutely blew my mind. It's one of those insights that really puts into perspective just how massive tokenization is about to become. So this comes from Charles Hoskinson, you know, the guy who created Cardano and was also one of the key architects behind Ethereum. When someone with that kind of credibility makes a prediction, you listen. He's saying we could see $250 trillion in tokenized RWAs by 2028. Let me just let that number sink in for a second. $250 trillion. Check this out.
There are $20 trillion of real-world assets that are waiting to enter the cryptocurrency space. There's $100 trillion of global markets that the cryptocurrency space can expand to, and cryptocurrencies will enter mainstream consumers' everyday lives, and all Fortune 500 companies will adopt them. That is the reward for cooperation, that is the reward for objectivity, and that's the reward for fairness in the rulemaking that comes forward. Every single leader in this industry has to recognize that and realize that this is a very rare moment where we get that reset. And if we act with humility and we act with unity, that reset will happen quickly. And we will be able to get a very significant package of bills passed during the next 2 years. As these conversations are ongoing, I won't comment any more on them, and we'll just wait for the transition to do its process. And I look forward to seeing the specific ethics requirements, and I look forward to seeing the other things that come to play and also understanding what the balance is between the legislative branch and the cooperation there and the executive branch of the United States, because it's still unclear how those two components are going to come together and how this policy is going to come together. Much more will be clear in the next 60 to 90 days, and I will be traveling to Washington, D.C. on a pretty regular basis throughout all of 2025. And as I mentioned, the sole goal of our policy office will be to make sure laws get passed that give our industry clarity and fairness.
And this is exactly what I've been talking about. There's just so much untapped value sitting out there that hasn't even touched these public networks yet. Charles is absolutely spot on here. We definitely still need regulatory clarity before we see the full floodgates open and everything really moves on chain. But here's the thing. It's already starting to happen in waves. Take Vert, for example. Let's jump back to the XRP Ledger for a second and take a fresh look at what's happening. If we scroll down here, you'll see that Vert Capital is absolutely dominating the tokenization space on the XRP Ledger right now. We're talking about $137 million in tokenized value. They are by far the biggest player in this game. And speaking of Vert, we just got this incredible announcement from Ripple XDev that really shows how big this is getting. So here's what's happening. Vert is completely transforming finance in Brazil by bringing over $40 million in regulated credit, all backed by public pension receivables, directly onto the XRP Ledger. Now, this isn't their first rodeo. Remember, they already launched their first tokenized fund earlier this year, but now they've gone ahead and completed a second on-chain issuance using something called Vert Sign. What's Vert Sign? It's basically a verifiable signature solution that runs on an EVM sidechain. This thing automates receivables and gives you real-time auditability while staying fully compliant. What's really exciting here is that Brazil is basically setting the global standard for how you combine compliance-ready blockchain infrastructure with traditional finance. And honestly, this is exactly the kind of major move we've been talking about for months now. Vert is a massive player that's bringing serious tokenized value to the XRP ledger, and this latest development is really something special. What we're looking at here is a completely new class of tokenized credit. Vert's latest operation is actually Brazil's first tokenized FIDC that's backed by public pension receivables. Now, let me break this down because it's pretty fascinating stuff. Basically, this is a highly diversified, low-risk asset class that's tied directly to government pensions. In Brazil, FIDCs are investment funds that take credit receivables and bundle them into regulated financial products. Think of them like asset-backed securities that give investors access to diversified income streams. Here's how it works. Each receivable represents a piece of monthly pension obligations that the federal government owes to retirees. So what investors are getting is predictable, government-backed cash flows, which is about as stable as it gets in the investment world. And get this, the fund is already holding more than 200 million Brazilian reais, which converts to about $40 million in net assets. But here's where it gets really interesting. They're expecting this to scale up to 1 billion Brazilian reais. That's around $190 million, as institutional demand keeps growing. Now, Vert didn't do this alone. They partnered with a fintech company called BYX, who's providing all the analytical and tech infrastructure needed to manage these pension-backed receivable portfolios. And they're not stopping here. Both companies are planning to tokenize additional funds before the end of this year, which means we're going to see even more traditional credit origination getting linked up with blockchain-based management and settlements. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be huge, and what I'm really excited about is that this signals we're about to see the next major wave of institutional money moving on-chain, and this is just still the beginning of this. Look, I really need everyone to grasp what's actually happening here, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're looking at the beginning of something much, much bigger. So they're talking about scaling up to 1 billion Brazilian reais. That's $190 million, which sounds impressive, right? But here's what will absolutely blow your mind. Vert has already executed more than 390 structured credit deals. We're talking about a total of approximately 104 billion Brazilian reais that they've issued, plus another 69 billion Brazilian reais that they currently have under management. Let me put that in perspective for you. This is absolutely massive. We're talking about a major league player in the financial world. So the fact that they're specifically choosing the XRP Ledger and getting this deeply integrated with it, That tells us everything we need to know about just how significant XRP and the XRPL really are. This isn't some small experiment. When players of this caliber are betting big on the technology, it shows us just how crucial this infrastructure is going to be for the future of finance.
The XRP Ledger and XRP are at the forefront of this big revolution. And again, this is just the beginning. Speaking of tokenization momentum, Ono Finance just dropped this incredible post about tokenized RWAs and how they're quickly becoming one of crypto's biggest growth markets. Here are some numbers that'll grab your attention. The total market for tokenized RWAs is sitting at $30 billion right now. And get this, that's nearly a 4x increase in just the last 2 years. Ono alone has tokenized over $1.8 billion to date. But what really gets me excited is just how fast this entire tokenization movement is accelerating. Should be sending us a crystal clear signal about just how massive this market is about to become. And look at these numbers. Stablecoins just crossed the $296 billion mark. We're talking almost $300 billion. Meanwhile, tokenization has hit nearly $35 billion so far, and that's up 12.79%. When you see growth rates like this, you know we're still in the early stages of something huge. Public networks are up 17+% at 22 almost billion. Again, the adoption wave here is not slowing down. Here's the thing. Regardless of what's happening with overall market conditions, we're going to see both stablecoins and tokenized RWAs continue growing at incredible rates. And honestly, this is just the beginning. If you look back at all the major releases and developments we've seen around tokenization, we're riding this massive wave that's brought us to where we are today. But imagine what this chart is going to look like in a year or two. Tokenization is only picking up speed, and the XRP Ledger is positioned right at the front of this movement. When we're talking about Charles Hoskinson's prediction of $250 trillion in tokenized assets, we're looking at a tidal wave that's about to reshape everything. So here's my advice. Lock in and pay close attention because you absolutely do not want to miss what's coming next. The XRP Ledger is going to be the biggest focal point in this entire space. XRP is positioned to reap massive rewards from being so early in this tokenization boom, right alongside the other major public networks that are seeing huge adoption in the tokenization world. All right, everyone, that wraps up today's video. I really hope you found this as exciting as I did. If this content is valuable to you, definitely smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. All of this analysis is completely free, and you're more than welcome to follow me on Hoskinson.